First and foremost, thank you so much for joining my show. How are you?
I am doing great, and I appreciate the invitation, and thanks for having me on.
Riley T-Jack was on my show earlier this year.
My girl.
Yeah, yeah. And I think maybe I saw a video of like you guys, like she came out to your location and you worked out together. And right before we started recording, I was telling you about your form. Um, yeah, it's so on point. But before we get into all of that, why is life great right now?
Life is great because I feel like I have a lot of momentum in all of the arenas in which I operate. So professionally, we have some really exciting things on the horizon for 2025 with our company. And then athletically, I'm feeling great. My body feels good, which I'm always every day I wake up, my body feels good. I'm grateful for that, for how much weight I'm moving and how much I'm training. Just I'm so grateful for my health and for my body and what it's capable of. And I've got the Texas State Championships in January, so
Yeah.
I'm getting to that. And just the nonprofit and volunteering and giving back and all the things that I'm doing, getting to work with the population I love to work with, our uniform personnel. I feel very blessed and fortunate and very excited for the future.
And you started getting more into public speaking, right?
Yes, over the last year.
Yeah. So what drove you to that, and how does that compare? Do you get more nervous doing a big speech, or doing a competition squat?
It's funny you ask because I've shared this recently with a couple of people in my public speaking group about how the confidence that I've built from public speaking and doing the reps and getting up in front of people has actually helped me control my nerves and perform under pressure on the platform when I compete in Olympic weightlifting. And so it's really, I wasn't expecting that. It wasn't really a benefit I was expecting to derive from getting into public speaking, but I have noticed a lot of crossover between the two, and the confidence and that readiness and focus, it really bleeds over from one domain to the other. So I don't know which one I get more nervous on. I'd say probably it depends on the competition. Local
Yeah.
meets, I don't feel that nervous anymore. I used to feel nervous on any platform doing weightlifting. It didn't really matter where or when, but now it's really more the higher level meets, the national level meets, and the state meets. So hard to say, but what was your first question?
Just how do you get more nervous with public speaking, or if you're doing, if it's at a contest, whether you're doing a clean or, and you do, I say squat, but that's just, because it's an easy reference, but you do Olympic weightlifting. I mean, you're doing, I got the cleans and everything. It's just, again, just precision.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, squatting is a big part of my training, but you might have listeners confused about what Olympic weightlifting is, and it's a conversation I have multiple times a week. So I'll just clarify for people that Olympic weightlifting is the snatch and the clean and jerk, and then powerlifting, which oftentimes the two get confused. Powerlifting is squat, bench press, and deadlift.
Yeah.
And so even they're two completely different sports. It's called Olympic weightlifting because it's an Olympic sport. Powerlifting is not in the Olympics. It is in the Paralympics, though. I learned that recently. So.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So whether you mentioned about the nerves. So whether it's public speaking or, when you're named, you hear your name, to step up to the platform to conduct your lift. In those moments of where you're about to, go on stage in some capacity, do you have like a key phrase, or what's your go-to pep talk?
I've been asked this question before. I don't really have one. I really focus on my breathing. The breathing is something I've been working on over the last year, really probably less than that, about 6 months. Yeah, probably a year. Just learning how to channel my breath and use it in a way that helps me remain calm but focused. And I've played around with different breathing techniques and down regulation, up regulation, because sometimes people want to be slapped and amped up, and other times, but my normal competition, my normal operating level is very high anxiety. And so for me, I find that I do better if I calm down a little bit and find that middle ground. It's always a work in progress, but that's something I've been playing with. So as far as phrases and stuff, I don't really have any specific mantras or anything that I think about. I really just focus on my breath and connecting with my body and just doing what I came there to do. And I think that the thinking for me happens in training. That's when I'm thinking hard about what I want to do, going through my checklist, focusing on my form, focusing on execution, giving myself that self-talk when I need it.
Yeah.
And then when I get to the platform, the work's been done and now I just have to execute.
No, that's excellent. I like you talked about breathing, because that's something I've been looking more into this year as well. Was there something, how did you stumble upon that? And the follow-up question to that is, have you implemented that to the rest of your day-to-day life outside of speaking and weightlifting?
Absolutely. So I first learned about breathing, man, I don't remember first, like way back when, but recently, the Huberman Lab podcast. I don't know
Yeah.
if you're familiar with it. Yeah. He talks a lot about different breathing tactics, and I've implemented the physiological side, which is that down regulation breath. And so you do 2 inhales through the nose and then a long exhale through the mouth. And I use that fairly regularly. I use it before taking a big lift. If my heart rate's super high and I need to bring it down a little bit, I'll use it then. I'll use it if I find myself really stressed out and overwhelmed in my own head during the day, or when I'm moving from thing to thing and I need to just shift my state a little bit or bring myself down or back to center, I'll use that. And so I've used it multiple times, throughout the day, throughout the week. And then I teach this also to the military members and first responders that I work with, because it can be really powerful to just shift this inner state, kind of our inner environment and that self-talk in our head, especially for first responders who go from one thing to the next. They'll go from being at a desk to jumping in the car and going. They'll go from a really long, stressful work day at the station, and then they have to go home and be a parent. And so if you take that stress from the day and from the job home, it can potentially be detrimental to the people around you and your environment. So how can we use our breath to control our internal environment, thus influencing our external environment? And I think the breath is a really powerful way to do that.
What's the reaction of people when you suggest that? Because I imagine it's still, and I'm a follower of Andrew Huberman, so all that stuff. And I think you do the nose thing too, or is it the mouth tape that you do? Or
mouth taping.
That seems to really been catching on too. But yeah, what's the reaction, or like with first responders, even military, when you say, hey, focus on your breath?
Sometimes it's met with like confusion or resistance, but I don't just talk about it, I have them do it. And I think once people do it, I'm up there at the front, I'm doing the breath work, I'm leading it, I show it, and then I have them do it with me. And so I think just having them go through that and experience that state shift in a matter of seconds or minutes is really powerful. And then they're like, oh, okay, I get that. And I can see how that can translate to, they're sitting in a chair watching a presentation, but they can put themselves in their environment and their workday and see how that might be really impactful and a good skill to have. And so I think just getting that buy-in and getting that practical application, just a couple breaths in person with me is beneficial.
How, you kind of touched on it, but I was hoping you kind of expand on it a little bit more. How important is just the breathing with teaching the skill and learning the skill of detachment?
So powerful. I think it's like I said before, it really brings that attention inward. And so if we have all these things going on in our external environment, when you close your eyes and you focus on your breath and nothing else, it removes that distraction. It removes that external noise and allows you to focus inward. Even if it's for 30 seconds, that's really all you need sometimes to detach from the situation, bring your attention to yourself, regain control, and then move forward and execute whatever the next task is.
No, I love it. I think, and I'm, like I said, I'm starting to read more about this, but I was talking with another friend of mine last night who's really into strongman, and he's active duty, but we were talking about, and we're both active duty Air Force, and we were discussing last night. So could you imagine if weight training was mandatory as part of like the day-to-day, even something as back squats or deadlifts, and just I think how much that might help with people's, I don't know, just there's just something about that's so powerful about those lifts and everything. And but with that, I wanted to ask, so do you have any pivotal moments in your career that shaped your path and led you to where you are today?
Definitely. Professional career, athletic career, both.
Whatever. Yeah.
So professionally, and I usually speak about this when I'm speaking to military first responders, but my husband going through his traumatic brain injury in 2022. So he was blown up in Iraq by an IED in 2007. And at the time, there was not really much discussion about traumatic brain injury in the veteran space or military space or anyone except for really the NFL. I think they were kind of the pioneers.
Yeah.
When it came to brain injury and head trauma. So I didn't really know anything about it. He and I met in 2010, started dating in 2011. So I've been with him for 13 years, and I didn't, the explosion happened before I met him, so I didn't know any different. But then years went by, and then in 2022, so 15 years after his IED explosion, he started to very quickly have severe symptoms down his left side. So he went from normal enough, quote unquote normal, to pretty much overnight having numbness, pain, tingling, weakness, and eventually pretty significant atrophy down his left arm without any explanation or incident that was recent. And he came to find out it was because of the nerve damage from the last 15 years prior. And it was actually very common that veterans and active duty were experiencing symptoms many, many years later from brain injury. And so he ended up having a full disc replacement in his cervical spine and then went through traumatic brain injury treatment. And watching him go through the rehabilitation process from the surgery and then the brain treatment, it was really the catalyst for my interest and passion for helping and serving those who serve. So I personally was never able to serve in the military because of a chronic health disease, a chronic autoimmune disease. But I was able to take my knowledge. So I ended up working in health and fitness and strength conditioning, and took my passion and my knowledge that I'd gained in that industry and paired it with this eye-opening experience that I had, getting this firsthand look into just how much our service members sacrifice on behalf of our country when it comes to their brains and bodies. And so I was able to combine those two. And about 2.5 years ago is when I really shifted my focus away from the general population and working towards focusing on the tactical population. So that was a big catalyst for me as far as my professional career goes. And I'm so glad I did it because I've never experienced anything more rewarding, challenging, but very rewarding and very fulfilling.
I love it. I mean, you said, you weren't able to actively be active duty in the military because you're conditioned, but you're still serving. And do you mind just talking about a little bit more about how fulfilling that is, the fact, because what you're doing is you're impacting lives that help people heal their invisible wounds. Yeah. But do you mind just kind of going into that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's no secret that both our military members and our first responders make immense sacrifices on their physical health, on their family life, on their freedoms. Like much gets sacrificed so that we can have this life that we love in the United States. And so I think to be able to discover that that's who I wanted to serve, and being married to a Marine, knowing a lot of service members, a lot of first responders, it was just, the writing was on the wall. And I'm so glad that I was able to recognize that that's truly what I feel like I was put on this earth to do, and to be able to give back to those who serve and who they sacrifice so much, and they are expected to do and perform at such a high level, but they don't have, as you probably know, there's not a lot of resources. It's getting better as the years go by, but there's just not a lot of resources on how to prioritize your health and fitness and wellness and not be so reactive. I think we all are experiencing now what's happening when problems are not addressed until they're huge issues. And there's a lot that could be done on the front end to prevent these big issues down the road, whether physical or mental or brain. And so I feel like I'm called to help those who have served at least maximize the quality of life that they have after their time in service. And then for those who are still wearing the uniform, implement strategies that can help them prevent some of these things that are clearly preventable or at least manageable. And so they don't become these huge issues down the road like we're seeing now with so many of the veterans.
That's an excellent point, because you're right. How long has your husband been in?
19 and a half years.
Yeah, 19. And I just hit 22 not too long ago. But, and whether people serve 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, I think we learn in the military to almost compartmentalize our feelings and our own self-care. At least some people do. And then it all just comes up, 15 years later, and your husband's, and that's something he felt. But there's also people who suppress feelings. And I think maybe 15, again, 20 years later, all of a sudden everything comes to light. But like you said, I think it is getting better, but there's still a long way to go. That's why I really appreciate what you're doing with Simper Stronger, because you're impacting people in order to help them heal their invisible wounds. On that, what's your advice for people, because you have discovered your purpose and your passion? What's your advice for people who are struggling to find their purpose and passion?
Couple things. I would say, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What gets you fired up? You go to bed at night and you can't fall asleep because you're so excited to do blank. Figure out what that thing is. And then part 2 of that is, what would you do for free? Like, what would you do if money was not an option? Because there's always a way to figure out how to turn something into a business, how to be innovative, how to provide a service or create a product. So what would you do if money wasn't an option or was not a factor, and then figure out a way to monetize that so you can make a living off of it and do what you love to do? Because there's a lot of people out there who go to a job and punch a clock and collect a paycheck, but are living without purpose. And doing a little introspection, a little soul searching to figure out what, for those people who are looking for that passion or looking for that purpose, think about how can I make an impact to and serve other people, because there's nothing like serving others. And if you get to collect a paycheck at the same time, all the better. But if you lead from a place of gratitude and service to others, you can't go wrong.
No, I love it. That's really cool. There's something I wrote down that I did want to ask you. Actually, I was going to have you a question. The question I had for you was, how have you turned something in your personal life that was once negative and uncomfortable and using that to fuel your passion for helping others? But I think you just answered that in different ways. But
yeah, and I can share another experience too
absolutely.
if you want on that note. And this is another one I usually talk about when I speak to groups of whoever, first responders, military, or otherwise, but health issues. So I obviously am in the health and fitness industry, and health is my number one priority always. But it started kind of out of a necessity. As I shared before, I wasn't able to join the military because of this health condition that I have. It's called ulcerative colitis. It's a form of inflammatory bowel disease, and it's disqualifying for military service. And I was really, really sick all through college because of that. I had just gotten diagnosed in my first semester of freshman year. I was horribly sick on a ton of medication, really almost had to drop out of school because I was so sick and couldn't really live a normal life. But it was really what inspired me to, one, take control of my own health, because I recognized during that period of my life that if I am not healthy and I'm not well and I'm not able to prioritize myself, I can't do anything else for anybody else. So just getting through the day, getting through classes, getting through school, and then finally graduating, it was a huge struggle, because in addition to all the things that come with college life, trying to go to class, get good grades, take exams, write papers, then I still had this huge health issue that was just lingering over my head the entire time. So it was really difficult and painful. And then getting on the other side of that many years later, it took a long time to really get it under control, but it was just a really powerful perspective shift about how when you have a health problem that is affecting every aspect of your life, you can't think about or prioritize anything else. And there's so many people out there that are living with chronic health issues and just not feeling their best or not thriving because they have to deal with these things all the time. And how much more could we get out of our life? How much more could we give back to others? How much more could we achieve if we prioritize our health a little bit more and focus on ourselves first and foremost, so that we can then be whatever we need to be for other people? And so that was another catalyst for both my professional and my athletic career, because I couldn't get to where I am now as a weightlifter if I was dealing with this health issue 24/7. So now, having gotten the other side of that, I'm the strongest, the healthiest, and the most successful I've ever been, because I prioritize my health. And a lot of people think, especially with the first responder and military community, think that prioritizing oneself is selfish, or I don't have time for that, or it's weak. And that comes with a price tag down the road. So you do it now or you do it later, up to you, but you're going to at some point have to focus on yourself and your wellness.
That's it right there. Do it now or do it later. And I have that problem because it's, again, like people will feel guilty, or we feel like we're letting someone down, or we're told we're being late, all these different things. And it's like, okay, well, 20 years from now, when these people aren't around and my family is having to deal with this, it's like, man, I wish I'd have done that. That same disease or the condition, I had someone else on my podcast, Alex Klein. She's actually friends with Riley T-Jag. She's on the Canadian women's bobsleigh team. But she had the same thing, or has the same thing. She was playing professional basketball overseas, and her condition started getting worse. And she thought maybe it's just the adjustment to the food or whatever. But it found out it was that same thing, and she had to completely change. And it's just, and I imagine there's a lot of mental aspect when you've been training for something or doing something your whole life, and then have to do a complete 180. I want to talk a little bit about your weightlifting, because you seem, just from my perspective, and I just see the highlight reels on Instagram, but what is your advice for building a good habit and optimizing environment for health adherence?
Oh, that is a phenomenal question. So there's a lot of layers to that. So building an optimal environment for health adherence, you said?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious. So when it comes to health and wellness, and I've learned this and implemented this mostly over the last year more than ever before, but sleep is so important. And if you listen to Huberman Lab, you know this, but there's no replacement when it comes to health, wellness, longevity, performance, mental, physical, everything. There's no replacement and nothing that compares to the power of sleep. A good night's sleep consistently. And that's something that has been when it comes to health and performance, my top priority over the last year. More than training, more than nutrition, sleep has been everything. And I've never experienced anything like the ROI that I've gotten from prioritizing sleep and just nailing my sleep this year. And I have not had an injury. I have not been sick this whole year because of it. And I don't think that's coincidence. So I would say if you're trying to optimize anything, start with sleep, because so many people are stepping over sleep and trying to do the other fancy cute stuff like the red light therapy and the saunas and the cold plunges, which I'm a fan of all of it. But if you're stepping over quarters to pick up pennies if you're doing all of those things and still not getting enough sleep. So that's my number one to anybody who's like, how can I do XYZ? How can I look like this? How can I perform like this? How can I lift like this? Go sleep, because do that for consistently for 30 days and come back and tell me how that's going. It'll change your life. So that's number one. Two is having a supportive community or environment in your space. So if you live with anybody else or you spend your time with anybody else, making sure those people are on board with what you're trying to do. If you're trying to improve your health, performance, wellness, whatever it is, having people that align with that and are supportive of that versus trying to sabotage, because I think that can be a real slippery slope when you have this mission and you have this goal and everybody around you is not on board with that and they're trying to bring you down or keep you small or keep you from progressing. So the people around you and the environment around you makes a huge difference. And then habits, daily habits matter a lot. And when it comes to habit change, I'm a big fan of doing things gradually. So if you are at point A and you want to get to point Z, let's not try to go there in a day or a week. It's going to take months, if not years. Yeah. But if you do the stuff consistently, then you're going to get there. And I'm a huge fan of gradual, consistent change and sustainability versus trying to make all the drastic changes at one time and then realizing that is not a long-term plan for success, because it rarely sticks. So I'd say environment, habits, sleep, obviously training and nutrition matter a ton. That's a very individualized conversation. So I tend to not want to give like generalized statements of everybody should be doing this, because that never works for people. Yeah. Everything's very individualized when it comes to that. So those are the things that come to mind.
I love the quote. You say you're stepping over quarters to pick up pennies. That's going to be a quotable and clickable moment. What's your sleep schedule like? What time do you typically go to bed? What time do you typically wake up?
I usually go to bed I'm getting into bed around 9:45, 10. And then I'm very fortunate that most mornings, that if I'm home and not traveling, most mornings I don't have to set an alarm. But my body naturally wakes me up between 6:30 and 7. So I'm sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night almost every night.
Yeah, it's actually messaged Riley a couple months ago when she was deployed, because she was really hitting the weights and training consistently out there, and I asked her like, hey, I'll message people, I'll DM them, and I'm like, hey, what's your sleep schedule? Because I'm very fascinated by that. What if you got 7 hours of sleep? Do you feel like your body would still be as highly productive, or
not even close? And that's one of the things I've really learned this year, is because 2020, I started tracking my sleep using a Whoop in 2022. And then 2023, I was averaging about 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep a night. And then 2024, I added a full hour. So I'm now averaging 8.5 hours of actual time of sleep. And the difference has been profound.
Yeah.
And I can now, on the nights that I do get 7 or 7.5 compared to 8.5, I feel a stark difference. I feel it in my drive to do things, my motivation. I feel my mental clarity, my focus, my productivity, my mood, and my body too. Like just how my body feels, my joints, my muscles, everything. Noticeable difference.
What time do you usually train? Is it just whenever you have time during the day, or do you train consistently at roughly the same time?
Usually around the same time, mid-afternoon, usually around between 2 and 4 is when I'll start my training session.
And do you feel like just having that consistent training in the same environment, roughly the same time, that's helped your body and your progress as well?
I think so. I used to not feel like it mattered much. I could train I have never loved early morning training sessions. I'm not the 5 a.m., 6 a.m. person. Yeah. My ideal time, if I had perfect world, I would love to train around like 10, 11, 12. But when I meet with my coach, we train at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And so it just kind of, now when I'm training on my own and I'm not with my coach, I usually train around the same time anyway, just because I use my morning hours to work and be productive on my business, take a little bit of a break, and then train in the afternoon. So
do you think having like that regimented, I know it's probably not exact, but a roughly regimented schedule, do you feel like that's critical for your longevity and just even for your own mental, emotional, and physical health and attitude?
Yeah, I think routine is important. Structure is important. I think people can go to the extreme of like, if they don't have their routine, and I used to be this person where if you don't have I didn't have my routine and I was like out of my element, then everything just went to hell in a handbasket and I couldn't function. And so I've learned to kind of find that middle ground where I love my routine. I thrive when I'm in my structure and my element, but I also know how to still function and adapt when I'm not at home or when things go off in some different direction. I know how to react and keep it reeled in. So I think that's either extreme is not ideal, but in general, I think most people would benefit from having more structure and more routine and more consistency and more discipline.
Yeah.
Just things.
No, I love it. Kind of transitioning, do you have like any new projects or initiatives that you're currently working on that really excites you and you can't wait to share with any audience?
I do. I can't share it yet.
Okay. No, it's fine. Yeah.
There's some big changes coming for our business coming in January of next year. So that will be.
Is it 2025, like in 2 weeks?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's the biggest one that's been kind of most top of mind. But then always working with our nonprofit. So the Semper Stronger Foundation, that's who we work with veterans going through traumatic brain injury treatment. And we work in tandem with functional neurologists who are treating the brain. And then our job as Semper Stronger Foundation is to work with them on the body. So we help them reconnect the brain and body, restore function through physical movement, reduce physical pain, regain physical capabilities and joy of movement again after sometimes many years or even decades of not. So that's something that's ongoing. We're always looking for opportunities to help more veterans and first responders that have been injured in the line of duty. So I'm always excited about that.
I think in the past 2 years since I've started following you on social media, each year you keep like leveling up. But it seems like, man, over the past 6 months, you've really, like you mentioned, you used the word momentum earlier. Mm-hmm. I predict in 2025, I think you're going to leap up multiple levels. It just seems like a lot of things are just positive mojo, just working in your favor. So I hope you have this monster year, you and your husband, in 2025.
Thank you. It's gonna be a big one for sure for him too. Marine Corps is turning 250 next year, so he's gonna be doing some traveling and events for the 250th birthday, which will be very exciting for all the Marines out there.
I did want to ask you, I forgot to ask you there was one weightlifting question. What do you think, what are common misconceptions about women who weightlift or power lift or do strongman?
Yeah. I think probably the biggest one, which thankfully it's not as much of a thing now as it used to be several years ago, is that lifting weights will make women bulky. I think the culture around that is shifting gradually. And I actually think more women are pursuing weight training because they want to be stronger and take up space and be bigger meaning, more muscular and healthier and not be smaller and skinnier. So I've always been a proponent of that. And I'm just glad that the culture is now shifting and it's more commonplace for women to seek strength training. And I see more when I work out in commercial gyms, whenever I travel or whatever, I see more women than I ever have before in the weight room, which is amazing. And it's a long time coming, but I think that's probably the biggest misconception is that, the bulky women lifting weights will be bulky. And on the other end of that is women who, for me, I get this daily almost on social media, is like, oh, you lift weights and you're really muscular, therefore you must be on steroids. And the number of times I've had this conversation in my comment or my DMs is just absurd. But, I get it. I'm more muscular than the average woman, but I've also been strength training for quite literally 3 decades between gymnastics and strength training in the gym. So yeah, it is possible to become muscular and strong, but you got to do it consistently. And I think most people just aren't either understanding or willing to accept that it's going to take a long time.
No, it drives me nuts, right? And I've seen people be hateful in your comments, and it's so stupid. You posted video of you doing front squats or maybe cleans from 2016, so it's not like you started lifting weights 3 months ago.
Right.
You
And
know,
most people want that quick fix. They think, oh, if she got so she looks like this, she must be on steroids. But if you look at me over the years, like the progression has been very gradual, but people don't take the time to do their research or,
yeah,
look into like a person's past or their history to know how they got to where they are now. And they assume that everyone takes shortcuts and is lying about what they did.
exactly right. And and they're not thinking like, oh, they're not assuming or going to give you credit for, well, she's been sleeping for 8 hours a day consistently for the past 18 months, or she's doing weekly cold plunges or whatever the tempo is. Okay, she's been eating, she has her macros dialed in and she's eating 1,800 calories a day with, certain fats and carbs or whatever the case may be. It's like, it can't be any of that consistently. So you're on steroids. And I'm sure your husband gets it too.
Yes.
And he's pretty jacked, but it's a safe, like, I don't know, let's give him credit for doing muscle ups, or like or just people don't want to accept the fact that just hard work and consistency versus like some pill or supplement.
Totally. Spot on.
I do love the squat rack you guys have, the bridge built. So I'm in Dayton. They're about 45 minutes from me. So
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
I saw your, like, I'm always like looking when I follow people on social media, like what gym equipment they have. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Patrick's a good guy.
Yeah. Um, I also read that you're fluent in Spanish. How was being fluent in a foreign language benefited your life?
Well, I'll be honest, I haven't spoken as much Spanish as of late as I did in college. I majored it was one of my 2 degrees that I got in college. I got my bachelor's in Spanish and a bachelor's in public health, but I spoke a lot more back then than I do now. But Joel, my husband, he's Dominican. His first language was Spanish. So it does help. It's, I guess, every once in a while it'll serve a purpose if I need to communicate in Spanish to somebody, or I can translate. And then, sometimes if I meet a native speaker and it's clear that that is their preferred language, to be able to speak, and people don't look at me and expect that I'd be fluent in Spanish. So it's fun to throw that curveball every once in a while, and to be able to converse with people who prefer Spanish as their language, and I can still hold that conversation. So thank you for the reminder to probably get back into speaking more Spanish. Joel and I talk all the time, like, oh, we should speak in Spanish once a week or at nights or whatever, just to keep myself fluent. And it lasts for a day and then we forget for 3 months. So I'll try again.
That's good. Do you still do any gymnastics training, or is that just something you did as a kid?
It was my sport for my whole childhood. And then I didn't really do anything consistently for many years. But this past year, I started competing with the United Grid League in addition to weightlifting. And so because of my participation in grid, I've actually gotten to tap back into some of that gymnastics that I hadn't done in a long time. So I got to do some handstands and some aerials, which is a cartwheel with no hands, some muscle up and some of the bar stuff. And it's been really fun. And I'm, again, like I said at the beginning of our call, it's really cool to see what my body's still capable of and the abilities that I've retained over the years, even though I don't really train for gymnastics anymore. Because I learned from such a young age, the quote unquote muscle memory is still there for some of these movements. And because I've stayed active and because I've stayed strong and mobile because of weightlifting and just my lifestyle, it's really cool to be able to see that I'm still able to put my body through some of these crazy movements and positions and not get injured doing it at 33. I'll take it.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you get inspired or that itch during watching the Summer Olympics? Because I feel like everyone watches the women's gymnastics team. They're kind of prime time, but did you watch it like, man, I need to get back out there?
I actually didn't really even watch the Olympics. I don't have a TV, so it was not really something I saw the clips on the highlight reels on Instagram, but I've always loved watching gymnastics, and it's just such a cool sport, and the things that people can do with their bodies is always awe-inspiring.
All right, I want to transition to some lighter questions. They're miscellaneous. There's no rhyme or reason. They are meant to be just really fun questions.
All right.
But what purchase of $100 or less has most impacted your life?
Ooh. Purchase of $100. Man. Are these supposed to be like first thing that comes to mind, or
whatever? I mean, yeah.
Because it's recency bias, but probably my eye mask that I wear when I sleep, and or the blue light blocking glasses that have helped me sleep. I don't know. That's maybe not the most.
No, no. Hey, how much has that really helped you? Like the eye mask and the blue light, the blockers as well. How much does that really? Because I'm guessing you probably do that at nighttime when you're trying to wind down.
Yep, I put the blue light blockers on after the sun goes down every night, and it just helps because they're red tint. They just turn everything reddish orange, and that's known to be very calming to the brain and less jarring, and it helps with melatonin production, just being exposed to darkness later in the day. So keeping the lights dim, keeping the red light or the blue light blocking glasses on, and then when I'm actually going to sleep, putting the eye mask on to remove all light. It's just been such a game changer for my sleep.
Awesome. I'll get up to check, especially the eye mask. I was actually thinking about that the other day. I know the nose thing is, I've seen the mouth tape and the nose strips, but I want to try the eye mask just to see that. Because I typically go to bed around 10 o'clock, but I feel like I'm not falling asleep right away. And I think because there's just some light like peeking into like even the moonlight into my bedroom and everything. So
yeah, it's enough to be disruptive to sleep for sure.
All right. If you could have your ideal dinner party with five guests, in addition to your husband, and it could be historical figures, past, present, celebrities or friends, who would you have on, or who would you have over?
Man, these are really good questions. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. I'd probably my grandparents. I only have one grandparent left, and I'd bring back the other three and have obviously the one who's still with us, just to see my grandparents again. And maybe my gymnastics coach. What year was that? 2001. So when I was 10, I lost my gymnastics coach very unexpectedly, and he had a really profound impact on my life as a child, just being in the sport of gymnastics. But we lost him so early and so young, and I was still a child, and it was the first real encounter I had with losing someone close to me, and it was very unexpected. So I'd say probably him, and then my grandparents.
Oh, beautiful. Hey, thanks for sharing with that. I had no idea about that, so thanks for opening up.
Yeah.
All right, the next, I'm just going to throw some names out there. Use one word, the first word that comes to mind to describe that person. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Riley T. Jack.
Boss lady. I know it's 2 words, but
that's
it's
fine.
hyphen.
Yeah.
Boss lady.
She earns it. She's earned it.
Yeah.
She was explaining to me the whole process and just the ends and detail about the bobsleigh itself. And it's really, really cool. Like, man, people don't realize even how much the sleigh actually weighs and the force and all that. But no, that's good. She is a boss. Jocko Willink.
Discipline.
Slacker. No, I'm joking. I had the opportunity to meet him a couple of years ago, and it was he was shorter than I thought, but much wider than and I was like, he's
very dense.
Yeah. And then there's like this aura about him. I was like, oh my gosh.
Totally. But he's exactly the same way in person as he is on the internet.
Yeah.
And every time I spend any time with him, it's just reinforced. Like, he is through and through who he appears to be online is truly who he is. He's a little bit more of a goofball in person. I've spent time with him and his family.
Yeah.
And he's definitely a little bit more laid back and funny than, the intense person that you see. Like, he is very much that person, but when he's with his family, it's cool to see him like be a little bit of a goofball.
Cody Alford.
One word. I have a lot of words for Cody. I love that guy.
Your face said it all. I don't.
Trailblazer.
Yeah, it's good.
Trailblazer.
Last person, your husband Joel.
Partner.
Yeah.
Life partner. Best friend.
That's great. All right. Last question in terms of the podcast, and this is a question asked at the end of every single episode. If there was a giant billboard with your picture on it for the world to see and your message, what would you want your billboard to say? And where would you want that billboard to be?
Oh, I would want that billboard to say, first thing that's coming to mind is trust the process. I was thinking about that yesterday. Trust the process. There are no shortcuts. Trust the process. We'll go with that. And then where would I want it to be? Goodness gracious. The 405 freeway in Southern California.
Perfect.
That's where I grew up. And it is a busy freeway.
Yeah. I think the quote that I had, I think you might have posted that, or I don't know where I got that. I saved it for you because I've been wanting to have you on my podcast for probably about a year. Yeah, our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time.
Similar message.
Yeah. Where can people find you, or where do you want people to go?
As far as social media goes, Instagram is where I spend the most time. So I'm at Rebecca.Rouse on Instagram. And then my website is semperstronger.com. Our nonprofit is semperstrongerfoundation.org. And I think that's everything.
Yeah, and I'm going to link all that in the show notes. Do you have any parting shots or parting thoughts you want to share with everyone?
I think we've covered it all. Or a lot. We've covered a good chunk of the stuff, but I think I'll just leave people with that same message. It's just, if you're afraid to start, just start. Wherever you are now, just get started. Take one step forward and then do it again tomorrow and keep going. Just don't stop. And you can be a completely different person a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. Your life could be completely unrecognizable, but it requires consistency and it requires taking that first step.
Awesome. Rebecca, thank you so much for doing my podcast. This really means a lot to me. I know how busy you are and you have a lot going on. And just for you to give me like your time and attention and just sharing your wisdom, thank you so much. I really do appreciate this.
Thanks so much. It's been great hanging out with you this morning, and I hope you stay warm up there.